Welcome back to Zero Access Footy. Today I'm going to be talking about the Brisbane Lions whacking the Hawthorn Hawks on a Friday night game, as well as North Melbourne beating the Bulldogs and a first top 8 win for in 38 games. They were 37-1, one being a draw against Brisbane in Tassie, and also their first Thursday night game win since 1991. Yes, you heard that right, 35 years ago. But we will be starting off with Brisbane versus Hawthorn. And I'd been a big holder in Brisbane. I'd held my faith. I wasn't letting go just yet. I had believed that they were going to be a premiership contender regardless of their mid-season form slumps. But then last week, I'm just like, okay, there's a lot of signs here where I'm just like, it feels more that they're still just giving up halfway through the third quarter rather than Carlton's system being so good that Brisbane weren't able to hold up defensively. So I just thought, okay, Brisbane, they've been able to flick that switch in recent years and just been able to turn it on, and other teams haven't been able to match it. I feel like they'll be able to do it again, and they did. Brisbane are the best kicking team I have ever seen with my own two eyes. This is the best field kicking team I have ever seen. It is ridiculous the amount of kicks. This is spearheaded by Dane Zorko. The amount of times I was watching this game, a lot like in the third quarter as well, you notice it, where he just hits a target between 3 Hawks players. And it's just like, it is so system breaking for the opposition that they cannot hold up defensively, because once he finds that, he gets another handball, he hits another kick, and it is weighted so perfectly that regardless of how Hawthorn set up, regardless of how good they have been defensively all year, they weren't able to hold up, because the second that first layer collapses, he then broke the second layer. And it wasn't just him. Lachie Neale has had a fantastic season. And once again, Brisbane's midfield were able to get on top. Sam Draper, I've been a harsh critic of him. He has been great over the last few weeks. He has really provided first-class service to the likes of Neale, to the likes of Ashcroft, to the likes of Dunkley, Bailey. I can keep on going. And I just think when you look at why Hawthorn needs someone like Zach Merritt, tonight shows why. Their midfield against the best does continuously lose. And it's not always in the clearances, because they have got 2 rucks and because they can sort of grind down oppositions. But I feel like around the ground, their midfield can oftentimes get beat. And you saw that with Ashcroft. You saw that with Neale especially. Those two have just been absolutely awesome over the last fortnight. And I think Neale, for the entire season, has arguably been a top 5 midfielder. I genuinely think his season has been his 3rd best for his career. That is how good he is going right now, and he is earning every dollar he would be getting in the off-season. Then you look at the forward line for Brisbane, and they just tore Hawthorn to threads. You look at this Hawthorn back line, and for most of the season, they've been pretty poor at ground balls. And in the air, you'd always say they have a strength, because they've got the likes of Barrass, Battle, Sicily, they've got Weddle down there, and they've got Hardwick as well, who's a really, really good lockdown small. But when he's taken up with Cameron, you've got Logan Morris absolutely dominating, and then you've got Barrass, who's actually really struggled, I think, since coming back from his hamstring injury. And Sicily has had an up and down year. You really got to question, well, is this a premiership backline? Because Weddle is just a so-so player right now. He hasn't become that damaging weapon like a Nick Blakey, where he's just all run and dash off halfback, partly because he's not utilised, but partly because you've got someone like Impey next to him. You just got to question, what is he doing there? Because he's not providing offense. He's not a lockdown, even though he did a decent job against Logan Morris. But he wasn't able to do anything like switch onto Lohman, who has been fantastic. Kai Lohman might be an All-Australian player. I think he can make the squad. I doubt he pushes for the team, because there's probably realistically only going to be one small forward. Like, we know that's going to be Nick Watson, because the season he's had, even though he was very well held tonight by Ainsworth. But I genuinely feel like he and Charlie Cameron have been so crucial to this Brisbane Lions team this year, and have had super underrated seasons, specifically because of what Lohman was doing last year, where he had a very quiet year. For him to bounce back like this is phenomenal. And then you look at the back line of Brisbane, what they were able to do last week was abysmal. Like, they just got belted on. Harry Dean kicked the goal. And then this week, Harris Andrews is just completely impenetrable. And then you've got Darcy Gardner doing a great job on Jack Gunston. You've got Ryan Lester kicking a goal. Like, Ryan Lester, 250th tonight, kicked a goal. Like, that's the state that Hawthorn were in towards the end of the game. I just think you have to give credit to this Brisbane team because they have been so difficult to stop for now 4 straight years, basically. And once again, they're going to be priming for a tilt at the flag. But for Hawthorn, it's a really difficult game because you thought this was a clash where they could really bring it up to a top 2 team who had just had a horrific week. And, you know, maybe they can really state their claim as a top 2 team because you look at Sydney and there's a bit of fault. You look at what Brisbane are doing, there's a bit of fault. You look at Adelaide and their offensive half still hasn't been able to click. You look at Geelong, the season they've had. Melbourne, you're still maybe not so sure that they're the absolute top, tippity top this season. And you're like, Hawthorn can really do it. And then they come out and that's the effort they gave. I thought some of the back half turnovers were absolutely dreadful and really handed it to Brisbane, to be honest. Like that third quarter, the amount of turnovers where it was just simple fumbles. And yes, Brisbane's pressure was elite and it has been when they are on. But I just think as a top 4 team, and to be honest, the team that could have pushed for third this round, so second all the way up to second and got a home qualifying final, you got to be better. You should be used to those high pressure environments. You should be used to performing under pressure, and they simply weren't. So I think for Hawthorn, you're really frustrated. I look at the forward line. They had to move Mitch Lewis to a wing sort of at the start of the 4th to see if something could work. Is it too tall? Obviously playing 2 rucks in Meek and Reeves, and then Chol, and then Lewis, and then Gunston. It's essentially 4 non-ruck talls. And yes, they do some stuff where Reeves and Meek barely are ever on the park together. And yes, Chol can go on the ruck at times when they need to sort of break glass in case of emergency. But it just hasn't fully clicked when all five of them been there together. And maybe you rely on Chol to be in the ruck as your sort of second ruck instead of having Meek play 50%, Reeves play 50%, and then Chol maybe have a couple hit outs here and there. I think maybe you can get more out of him there. But we saw what Brisbane were able to do and just turn it around that quickly. Hawthorn are going to be looking to do the exact same thing next week. And I believe they play Collingwood, which would be a huge game for them to close out in the last couple of rounds. But we do want to move now to Thursday night where North Melbourne got a fantastic win against the Bulldogs. I held my faith in North Melbourne. They had lost 5 straight games, but the Bulldogs are one of the fakest teams I have ever seen in recent memory. Their percentage shows exactly who they are, and they are nowhere near a top 6 team. And North Melbourne took them to the cleaners. North Melbourne were a 5-goal better team throughout the entire game. Regardless of what the scoreboard reflected, I thought the game was much more on their terms. It was a much more North Melbourne game, and I thought that they really took it up to the Bulldogs, and they weren't able to respond when they needed to most. You look at what Bont did, they quietened him down, and when you've got so many players who are arguably D-grade calibers only going up to the level of C-grade, which is what Beveridge is a key at, you got to start questioning him. The Bulldogs had a chance here to potentially leave the Wildcard Rangers and push out into 5th or 6th spot. Doesn't look like that's going to be happening anytime soon. And now they've got 2 very difficult games to close out the year. They've got Carlton, they've got Melbourne. That is 2 games where, yes, they're probably heading into favourites against Carlton, but they might only be 1 game ahead of them if Carlton win on Sunday against St Kilda. That would be a huge result for Beveridge, I think. But to head back to North Melbourne, give them their plaudits. The game started and Paul Curtis was on fire. His 2 goals, incredible. His mark on the wing as well. Just genuinely superstar talent right there. And David King on the call was basically saying he thinks he can be their best player. And when I look at him, I see shades of sort of a mix between Zach Bailey and Cam Rayner. He's probably got that more physical body like what Cam Rayner does, but I think he has closer attributes to what Zach Bailey does, where he does get up the ground and plays 30-40% midfield time. He can potentially play on a wing because he is such a freak athlete, and then going in front of goal, just genuine talent and know-how in terms of getting to the right spots and finishing. I thought he was a real kickstarter for North Melbourne to get them going, and they started really well, and that was so important for them because they were able to essentially hold the Bulldogs at arm's length for the entire game. Yes, at moments it got to a 1-goal margin, and you thought the Bulldogs were coming, and this is finally their time when they'd stake it. But North finally stood up. They finally were able to hold on, and for them, that this is a huge win. Not only for this season to potentially keep them in the wildcard race, but just for their confidence to build and really show, yes, now there is improvement. Before this game, I'm like, well, yes, on the sheet, you look 8 wins compared to 4 or whatever it was last year. I think it was 5 last year, 2 and 3s for the last 5 years before that. And you question, yep, some of the wins this season hadn't been great. You put that aside, you now have a win against the Bulldogs, who, yes, might not be the best team, but is still arguably top 8 caliber. And that can do so much for this confidence for this group heading forward. And what can really kickstart next year as the real season for them to push into top 6 contending. The game itself, like their pressure was elite. LDU, this was his best game of his career. You look at the stats, and you might say maybe it's not, but I think it was 30-2. And I think his work around the ground was so much more crucial than his work around the contest, even though that was good. I thought he was getting back and really helping out his defense when need be. There were a couple of times where he was essentially the furthest to goal from North Melbourne player. But there were also times where he was going forward and he did kick 2 goals. And he's just like, that is the reason why we've drafted you with pick 4, why we've paid you the big bucks, and you are now performing. Colby McKercher, sometimes he just shows flashes where it's just like, he is so quick and so good by foot that you're just like, this is Naz-esque. This is Errol Goulden-esque. And he's just starting to piece it together now, week by week. What George Wardlaw does for this team as well cannot be understated. He is so crucial in order to really show that shin boner spirit that North have lacked, arguably, for the last 6 years. Defensively, they looked a lot more solid this week. Forward half, still some issues. I think connecting inside 50, it was a lot better, sure, but there is still so much to improve from, and that's the thing. This is still a very, very young group, and they're starting to click together, and when that happens, you can really do some special things rather than getting so much from the outside. When you've got a group of arguably 10 super talented players, they're all going to be coming through for the next probably 10 years if they stay together, when North can really see themselves challenging right at the top if all things go well. For the Bulldogs, really disappointing. I do question some of the things Beveridge did, like dropping Buslinger when you're coming up against a really tall North forward line. They had the likes of Dawson, who, yes, played backup rock at times, but still was essentially just a key piece down forward. Larkey, obviously, Trembath, and then also Darling. And then obviously having Curtis, who's a really difficult matchup in itself. Dropping Buslinger was really confusing to me because he'd finally started to build some form. And I'm just like, well, first of all, he's a young player, so you want to give him some consecutive games to really build his trust in himself more so than your trust in him, so that he knows he's AFL worthy. And he just hasn't been able to do that for Buslinger. And it's more so just the way that he has size. Like, it was Karmas who ended up moving forward anyway. And basically O'Donnell and Selwood and Nick Caulfield. Nick Caulfield should not be matching up on Jack Darling. He's nowhere near that player. Selwood, good player, has shown a lot of promise and will continue to develop. But ideally, he would... Yeah, maybe Curtis is the matchup for him. But he shouldn't then need to play any taller than what he needs to, because they simply don't trust their backline. And I don't understand why they haven't recruited anyone. Why does it need to be an A+ player? Why not just get 2 B+ players for the same price, and so that your list is at least built up in a much better spot? There is no need to go all chips in on Butters when you can potentially go grab someone like Butch, and yes, they are interested in him, or even Wiedering, and get that genuine A grader, because their midfield is still very good. But I'm just so confused as to what the Dogs are. I genuinely think there is a world where they miss out on finals. Obviously, other results will have to go their way, but next week against Carlton will be such a huge game, because if they lose that, they go up against Melbourne, and Carlton would then be only 1 game behind them, who have Fremantle, who might be resting some players. So there is a world where the Western Bulldogs finish below Carlton on the ladder, and what that does for Luke Beveridge and this team, I think some genuine questions might be asked. But appreciate you all for staying through and watching this video. We're hoping to do some more videos like this on the channel. Obviously, Reece did one last week, and he doesn't get to be here for a North win. How crazy is that? But as always, leave a like, subscribe, comment your thoughts below, because there were some big wins and really staking their claims by North and by Brisbane this week. But as always, appreciate you watching, and we'll see you all on Tuesday or Monday for the next pod. I don't know which yet. Bye.